Right. All right, so we're on, we're gone live, and hello everybody. Welcome to another episode of Old Guard versus New Blood with Majestic. So this is 45 minutes of discussion on a particular topic, and we've got a couple of oldies in the world here, and that's myself and Rasmus. Hi, Rasmus.
Hello, Dixon. Hello, everyone.
And then we got some youngsters in the industry. They might not think they're youngsters, but they damn well are compared to Rasmus and me. It's Romain and Patrick. So hi, guys.
Hello.
So
hey, everyone.
We're just going to rabbit for a couple of minutes whilst Facebook kind of gets up to speed and people start to come on in. If anybody's in the chat room and wants to say hi, then feel free. I'll try and bring them into the conversation and just. Press some buttons so I can see some bits and pieces. And if any of you can see the feed on Facebook, guys, and there are questions there, then please tell me, because I'm really bad at checking those kind of things out. So this month we've morphed Old Guard, New Blood into a kind of battle between between what works and what doesn't on crawlers, and so we got a great panel, really, I think. So I'm going to let and we have a good balance of in-house agency, tool side, and me, kind of like a sort of limbo land. So Romain, why don't you start by introducing yourself and who you do and who's Path Interactive?
Sure. So I'm Romain Damery. I'm Director of Tech SEO at Path Interactive. So we are a pure digital marketing and advertising agency based out of New York City. Although, we're all working from home right now, so I guess it doesn't matter as much. There's a sneak peek at the office, by the way, right behind me, courtesy of Zoom virtual background. Thanks for that. I'm pretty sure the office is exactly the same right now, like just as empty. Yeah. And I've been doing SEO and digital marketing for slightly over 10 years. So I'm very honored that I made the cut to be considered a young blood, because I guess it wasn't that obvious at first. Dixon was like, "How old are you, Romain, again?" Dixon, it's the beard. I'm not that old. But I'm just being here today.
Just during warm-up, guys, he did say that he'd use front page, so that is a category.
Yeah, I started early. Yeah, that's technically not really SEO. I didn't care about SEO that much, but I probably created my first front page website when I was 12 or something like that. So.
It was SEO for me at the time, anyway. Right, Patrick, why don't you say who you are and talk about your fantastic tool?
Hi, everybody. I'm the co-founder of Sitebulb, which is a desktop website crawler and SEO auditing tool. So if you don't already use Sitebulb, just go and download it now. While we're waiting to get started, you might as well go and download it and sign up for a trial and get going.
The plug's at the end.
Yeah. Oh no, sorry. I'll say at the end as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's me. We do SEO auditing with the software. I've been in the SEO world since about 2012. Before Sitebulb, we had another tool called URL Profiler, and that's kind of how we got into the tool game. But it's been Sitebulb pretty much since 2017, and it's going from strength to strength. And we're that's me.
Jolly good. Okay, and Rasmus, lovely blinds that you got behind you there. So,
I thought that was appropriate, even though it's a Zoom background. I don't think you really want to see the real background here. So, thanks for having me on, Dixon. You and I have known each other for a long time. I think it's bordering on 20 years. Been doing SEO the whole time, both at the agency level, at in-house, and as affiliate, and been that route. And recently I joined Blinds to Go, which is blinds and curtains online, as the global SEO and e-commerce director. So it's exciting to finally be on the client side for a change and steering that along.
So I remember once flying to Copenhagen for the day and going to a conference that Rasmus had, and I went to Copenhagen for lunch, a couple of beers, a trip round his factory-based venue, and it was fun. I went back for the day. So yeah, but yeah, I think we've known each other, I don't know, since the very first conference I went to, so probably 2002, something like that. It's been a long time anyway. So
that's a long time ago. Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, obviously this has all been put on by Majestic. So Majestic have come out with a couple of things since last month. If you haven't checked out the new hub for looking after your reports and sort of the new campaign manager tool, then do go in and have a check with that if you're a Majestic user. Hope you are. And also they've got some interesting posts on link fidelity versus link volatility, which takes you a little bit around the houses as to why volume is not always good compared to quality and stuff. So interesting posts on there. If you want to try Majestic and you haven't already, then it's a good thing to do. A little tip for you guys, if you aren't a Majestic user, I don't know if it's still true, but if you ask them for a demo really nicely, then they'll do you a one-to-one demo, and then ask them if there's any way you can get in and have a bit of a trial. I don't know if that still works, and I might get sacked for saying that if it doesn't. Anyway, it's worth a try. Okay, so guys, we're going to be talking about crawling today. Obviously, something that Majestic does a lot. Patrick does a lot, but also on agency side, you've probably got problems with some clients that are having problem with crawl issues, and certainly things have changed on the crawling side a lot over the years. So I think there may be some different perspectives from the olds in the room and the younger ones in the room. So I'm going to start with the approach that I usually do, which is give us one thing about crawling that SEOs don't seem to pay attention to. And I'll start off with Romain. If there's something that you think that SEOs don't pay attention to in crawling that they should do.
Well, I don't want to sound like presumptuous, so maybe like less experienced SEOs, I would say maybe don't pay enough attention to the rendering process that happens between the crawling and the indexing. I think that's something that that people don't pay enough attention to, and the rendering, like beyond just activating JavaScript, but also like what does it look like, how long does it take to render the main content and things like that. I think that's more and more important, and yeah.
Okay, I think we'll come back to that a little bit later because I think that's going to be good. Patrick, do you want to go with one?
Yeah, so I get a lot of support tickets or get exposed to kind of customer issues with stuff, and like when they get confused or when they're not sure what to do with certain things. And often like the way it kind of gets pitched to us is, why is this thing happening? Why is X happening? Or why is Y happening? And one of the things which we see a lot of is like, your software is taking ages to crawl my site. Why is it so bad? Why is it so slow? And kind of when you dig into this and say, right, can you send me a screenshot so I can just have a look at what's going on? And this screenshot arrives and there's like a queue of 500,000 URLs. It's already crawled 500,000. And you can just see in the URL log that it's stuck crawling like paginated pages or faceted search or something like that. And like when you kind of point this out to the customer, that's, you need to go and like limit the crawl. That's what the problem is here. Yeah. And most of the time they are SEO professionals who are sort of using our software. We'll get responses like, okay, right.
Sorry, that was me. Okay, if there's any questions on Facebook, I can't see it. I've just closed Facebook down. Sorry, Patrick, carry on.
What was I saying? Oh,
yeah. Crawling too fast.
So yeah, and like the response might be, well, it's okay, these pages are canonicalized anyway, right? And like, that's not the point. The point is that you shouldn't be exposing Google or crawlers to these pages in the first place. You're forcing them to crawl a whole load of crap that they shouldn't really need to be crawling. Unless they need to crawl these URLs from a discovery perspective, you shouldn't be forcing them to crawl them. And so like, it's just a massive waste of crawl budget. And I think there's definitely a disconnect, certainly with a bunch of our customers, where they're not really understanding that actually you should be making it easy for Googlebot to navigate your site and find everything that you want them to find, and find all your valuable pages, your unique value, indexable, valuable stuff, instead of wasting time all over the place. Okay. Whatever junk they're crawling.
And we might come back with some tips for that as well. So, and Rasmus, got anything to add on there?
Yeah, I think one of the questions I usually ask, at least when I was on the agency side, is how many pages do I have? And usually other people around the table, their eyes starting to flick because they really don't know. So I think I've written a little note here that says sitemap versus actual pages versus internal crawls versus the site domain operator at Google. Which by that I kind of mean is how many pages do you have, or do you know if you've got a full crawl, or if you've got 100% coverage on your crawls? And usually I get the answer that no, we don't really know how many pages we have. So how do you know that you're actually getting everything indexed and getting the rankings and the traffic you deserve? Okay. So getting a fix on how big your site is basically something I run into.
Yeah, okay, so there's some overlap there between canonicalization questions and duplicate calls and stuff. So we'll come
absolutely,
back to that.
Yeah.
And I think if I'm going to add one that's different to those, I think that a lot of SEOs don't think about where their site is hosted and whether there's whether there's other websites sitting on the same IP address trying to hog all the hosting. So Google has, or a search engine has to decide, what it's going to crawl. And if you've got one website on the same server as 200 other websites, and one of them happens to be, a massive, great big website with 2 million pages and a little bit of authority, then that may be hogging a lot of the crawl as well. So that's kind of a thing I'd have on there. I don't know. I say that a lot, but I don't know if that's true or whether that's me, saying my bit. I mean, do you think that people make a mistake going for cheap hosting sometimes, and just that affects the crawl? Anyone want to go with that?
I mean,
absolutely.
Sorry. No, you go ahead, Rasmus.
Well, I think absolutely. I talked to a guy the other day in a situation. He built a site for his wife, and he said, "Well, I put it on a Raspberry Pi and put it in my living room." Said, what? So just that. That's a huge.
He's clever though.
Yeah.
That is true.
But I said, once you got Google crawling, Yahoo crawling, MSN crawling, and customers and all that kinds of stuff. So I do believe that putting things on a shared host that has a lot of pages you want to get crawled is a dangerous path to take. If it's a very important side of yours, definitely.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Sorry, Lily's just come in, so that's good. You're just getting support from Lily there.
Oh.
So, no.
Hey, yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, I think shared hosting is not necessarily bad for crawling or indexing. I think it depends more on the type of site that you're hosting and how much traffic do you have, and do you have huge peaks of traffic or not? Because especially if you're on shared hosting, if you have a lot of traffic, that's probably a bad idea just because of the bandwidth and the CPUs and things like that. But if it's a small, blog, then I would say it should crawl fine. You should be fine. Now, if you have, other sites on the same machine that are always, over capacity, then that will cause issues probably for Googlebot or even ourselves to crawl. We could get kicked out. It just takes forever, things like that. So I guess, the load on those servers is what may create problems or not. Otherwise, I don't think there's inherently anything really bad with that. And also, you don't really have much control of what you can do on that server, and then you can have other issues. You can't install this, you can't turn that on, you can't, it's very limited to what you can do. But so I guess it depends.
Okay, you're banned for saying that. You're not allowed to say it depends.
Such an old gal comment. Sorry, I'm not supposed to say that.
No, Patrick, anything you want to add?
No, I mean, not really. I was going to say it's horses for courses. If exactly like Romain said there, if you have a small site, it doesn't matter. You're not gonna not get crawled. But as soon as SEO is a big factor for you, you should be looking just to upgrade your server anyway. It shouldn't come to that really.
Yeah, it's not that expensive, is it really? No. When it comes to the greater scheme of things. Okay, so guys, we're talking about canonicalization or indexing, how many pages you've got in your site and stuff. So that kind of leads into a lot of our users are WordPress users. Well, 58% of the web, or I don't know what it is, but a lot of people, and probably a larger than average number of Majestic users are WordPress users, because SEO seem to dive into that technology. So I'm not saying whether Majestic WordPress is good or bad or indifferent, but looking at WordPress and looking at the questions, the points that you guys made about canonicalization versus redirects, and trying to limit the crawl to just crawling the pages that you want, and not having a bot, going through different versions of the page. How does that manifest itself in WordPress? What things go wrong to WordPress users that cause the kind of problems that you're talking about in the crawl? Patrick, do you want to jump in first?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like specifically, I suppose I don't really get why it's inherently a WordPress problem that we need to be focusing on.
Well, one that I think is a WordPress, because it's a blog, you've always got content, and then you've got page 2, and then you've got page 3, and you've got page 4. So you've got all of those pages, which basically are summaries of all the content of the individual posts and things themselves. So just the way it comes out there by default, you've just got all these other pages which have to be duplicate content, because they're just giving snippets of the next section. That's
I mean,
kind of an example.
I think with all that stuff, there's pretty straightforward plugins. Yoast takes care of all that stuff, so that you're not even like surfacing it to the crawler. So, like, I guess, like, if you've got like a crappy CMS, whether it's your WordPress or a plugin in WordPress or whatever, that's creating extra pages, like different versions of the same page, you don't want that at all. Like, you need to be turning that stuff off if you can. And then the rest of it, it just all comes down to consistency in terms of how you're referencing the pages. So, like, making sure you've got self-referencing canonicals and using absolute URLs on them. Making sure your architecture, internal linking is all just completely consistent. And then even when you're, doing external links, making sure that that's consistent. You only ever link into the canonical, only that URL goes in the sitemap. So in terms of like the signals you're sending to Google, it's like you're making sure that it's completely consistent signals that are going to Google, so that they agree with you on what the canonical is. And then, like, in terms of like in terms of sections of content being repeated on multiple pages, from a call and indexing perspective, I don't really see that as a big deal, to be honest. Like, I don't see it as something you need to be worrying about too much. Like, Google can understand that this is a category page and this is the real post. That's not too much of a big deal, and it's quite straightforward to tick a few boxes in your plugin to sort of hide those pages or not surface them in the first place.
Yeah, I think pagination is good though. Like, in like for any sites, like pagination, I think it's good to discover content on the site and making sure it's part of the architecture. But for WordPress, and especially actually for Shopify now, because it's really booming, one of the issues that we see is that you have one product and you put it into different like collections, and then depending on where the product page itself is linked to on different collections, then the URL slug changes and adds that collection, and then you end up with having like the same page under different URL. So then, like Patrick said, then you want to make sure that you have a single self-referencing canonical tag to usually the shorter version, like the PDP URL, and not the one that's coming from XY collection page. But then what we find also is that if you're only really featuring products in specific collections, then even if you have a self-referencing canonical to the actual core product URL, Google will still prefer the one that has that's featured the most on the site, that has most of the internal links, that's the than the actual product itself, which is not really linked to from anywhere. It's just like you have to go to all products and then go to pagination and find it there. So you have to also, the canonical may not work if you're always featuring a non-canonical URL, and then you may not have the one you'd want necessarily indexed. And same thing for sharing on social media. You kind of like need to be aware of that. But otherwise, pagination, I think it's really great. I mean, for WordPress, like tags and categories can help with the interlinking, and it can keep users engaged, even can be good for them. I think the issue that we see on some large WordPress sites is just categories and tags really like getting out of control. Like, you have editors and marketers, you end up with like 25 tags for one piece of content, and if there's really no search volume at all for those tags or those category pages, and they're all like one word, and it's just you kind of have a strategy for like how many taxonomy in mind, right? Like what makes sense for the users for search engines, and maybe disallow some tags or some categories that don't make sense. But sometimes that's a nice way also to, instead of having, a piece of content that's on page 40 of your pagination series, then it's interlinked higher in the website because it's on a prominent category or tag that is valuable for users and search engines.
Is that easy to change on Shopify? I mean, so if you're saying that Canonicals don't really work very well on some Shopify site, I'm not a Shopify expert, so excuse me if I ask.
Nothing is easy to change on Shopify. Nothing is easy to change on Shopify.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Shopify works great. Okay. Rasmus, I mean, you're all e-commerce, so do you find that problem a lot?
Oh yeah, definitely, and I think that the problems relate to both what Romain and Patrick said here, that at least WordPress, for example, out of the box with the categories, the tags, the pages, the posts. In my experience, I've spent a lot of time removing stuff, de-indexing stuff, both through plugins and stuff, but using WordPress out of the box for like, let's say a regular site and not a blog. That's actually, there goes a lot of work into removing stuff and making sure that the tags is not, like Romain said, you have 40 tags and then you suddenly have 40 identical pages where the only thing is maybe the title slot or something. And the same with the categories, and it can easily get out of hand. And I'm seeing that a lot with the standard WordPress, but also in e-commerce, and especially as Romain mentioned, the Shopify, or where you have, like us selling blinds, we have a wooden blind, but it's also a white wooden blind. So it's actually relevant for two categories. But if the only product, then we might end up with having two category pages with the same product and the only product in it, which is just a waste of users and crawlers and everybody's time and effort, I think. So
but presumably there's a dichotomy then between, so Patrick would like us all to just crawl one URL because he's doing the crawl, and just like 301 redirects to the one version. But commerce is going to need, if you've got it in red and got it in blue, you kind of want to have some kind of canonical to get to one version of that, but you're still going to need to have different URLs for the user to be able to show.
Yeah, but we're trying to fix it the other way around and say, well, in let's say we have a blind, that's where I'm coming from, and we have it in 5 colors. Then we try on the product description and say, well, this blind comes in red, blue, white, and gray, and then might have a drop down on the product page where you choose either your fabric or your color. So you basically have one page. And then you have the variables on the page, so it's basically the one page. But it will get, once you get more products and you get more diversified colors, it can easily get a huge mess. Okay. And figuring out what kind of white is the right one is difficult.
Yeah. Sorry, do you want to jump in?
No, that's a good point as well. Like when you have like filters and faceted navigation and to choose the color, things like that, I think usually what we do is like we look at search volume and like, do people like really look for that blue item? And then maybe it doesn't make sense to add a canonical tag to it. And if you have 3 colors, that might not be such a big deal. But the problem starts when you have too many options and filters, and that Google control all of that, and it becomes like an infinite number of permutation in the filters. So usually we try to like make sure that the keyword research, like what makes sense to try to index, because it has volume, right? It's valuable, and making sure that on the CMS, all the facets are already in the same order, so it's easy to kind of like exclude anything that has like maybe more than 2 facets at once or 3 facets at once, because like people will look for like maybe a blue Nike shoe for men, but they usually don't really type the size directly in search engines. They just like, get me the shoe, and then they don't. So maybe we don't need to say it's from like that size or that, or like go and like define the details that then so maybe can get out of control.
Maybe better off to have a JavaScript sort of carousel of images and things, and so you just got one URL and then they can see the pictures. And
at least in theory it sounds pretty good, but then the real world hits, and what we sometimes do is like for blinds, at least and here in Europe, especially in Scandinavia, it's like the white blinds, and you can see behind me it's like we like the white blind stuff. So an example would be that
very clean, very
clean. So instead of having all the colors and optimizing for 10 different colors, we kind of say, well, let's have the white as the primary product page. And then we can see, as Roman is mentioning, if people are using the filters and we see, okay, somebody is really changing it to red all the time, then maybe we should do a collection or a category page with red in it.
Exactly,
and then take it from there.
And build a strong page,
And I think the advice here from Roman that using keyword research and search volume as one of the determining factors of whether or not you should create a page is a great idea, because creating a page that nobody searches for is again a waste of time and resources.
And your internal search, right?
And your internal search, yeah, that's a very good question, Patrick. That's something we just utilized, and one thing I started digging into is like the internal search. What are people actually searching for? It's a phenomenal signal to what we should create of content.
Yeah. Okay. So
I wouldn't just disallow all the internal search like necessarily, because you really have gold like in the internal search and see like, oh, I didn't think about that, like and sometimes it just ranks, and that's fine if it doesn't get out of control, and then you can get a lot of traffic from it too.
But speaking of crawling indexing, it can also consist of this dreaded spider trap, whereas I saw a site recently where they put like the 10 most internal searches or search engine underneath the search fields, and which if you click them, you'll get the search, and it kind of it was a bot trap like you've never seen, because the bot just kept on searching itself, and it just
it makes sense to just you've got to robots.txt or block out the actual search results of your own search crawler for search engine.
And then use the information to build a real page if it really turns out there's a lot of searches.
Okay, so we talked about, or you talked about at the start, Romain, sort of JavaScript or rendering, really. So page rendering and issues around page rendering, and Google have got spent a lot of time recently talking about their JavaScript rendering service, their web rendering service, and how they're very, very good at JavaScript rendering these days. So I got a few questions really. How good are they? Patrick, how good is Sitebulb compared to Google? And Romain, tell us a bit more about rendering. And for those that don't know the difference between rendering DOM and view source, what's the difference?
Well, the rendering is when it's retrieving all of the resources that the page is calling and executing those. So that basically means calling with JavaScript to make it easy to imagine. But it's also the layout. Like what does it look like then? And I think that there's different. I'm not talking necessarily about the rendering with all of the third-party tags and things like that, but just like I think for crawling and for what WRS, like the Google rendering service, is more concerned with, it's more like just the content. It doesn't have to run everything. It's just like getting is the JavaScript required to retrieve and display that content, and the CSS as well, and things like that. I think where some things may get missed is that, it's not just enough to sometimes just enable JavaScript on your crawler and then, I found it in the crawl. It's like, okay, but it's also, how long does it take the crawler to actually go through that rendering process for purely like the main content itself? And also, like, what does it look like? Like, do you find your main content like pretty high on the page? Does it look wonky? Are there resources that are blocked that prevents the page from looking the way it should to the user and things like that?
Mm-hmm. So Patrick, so your tool, that's what your tool does all the time. So when does it hit problems? When does it sail through? Is being a desktop tool an advantage for you on JavaScript? How does that work?
So a few of your questions there, like in terms of like compared to what Google can do, Sitebulb is effectively the same, if not better than what Google can do. So we use headless Chrome to do it. And I think it was like, I don't know, this time last year or something, Google switched to Evergreen Chromium. So basically doing the same, where they're using pretty much the latest stable release of Chromium to do their rendering. And that's the same, we do the same basically. So whenever like a latest stable version comes out, we upgrade to that. So what that means is that in terms of features, like, page features, there's not that much that Sitebulb can't handle. There's not that much that Google can't handle. And so it's very rare that we'll see a site that Google, and I can probably count on one hand, you know, the amount of times where we've actually seen a site that Sitebulb can't render at all. The problems tend to come when there's way too much on a page. There's just too much script, there's too much stuff happening. You're asking Sitebulb or you're asking Google to just do way too much work, and it's not going to just keep downloading more stuff and keep processing everything. It's just going to go, I'm going to cut off now and we're not going to do any more work. And that sort of manifests in Sitebulb when Sitebulb's trying to crawl a website. There's a cutoff point, so let's say 5 seconds by default. If it's getting to a point where it's not finding certain links on the page because it's hitting this cutoff point before the page is fully rendered, then you're not going to be able to crawl the whole site. And then in the same way that Romain was just saying there, with what Google's saying, they're kind of prioritizing the content at the top of the page rather than some of the what they're considering perhaps less important content, or content that they're just not getting a chance to get to because the computational resource is too high. You're asking them to do too much work. So there's a massive difference in terms of how much computing power you need to just go and grab a page of HTML versus what you need to do for rendering. I think it's something like 20 times different. So that's why they can't just do this by default for everything all the time. And they're having to make these decisions. Do we need to do this? And looking for ways, like opportunities when they're rendering, to just make sure we get the most important stuff. That might mean that there's a load of content on your page that's just not getting indexed at all. And if it means that there's links that's not getting indexed, then, or not getting found, then that can be a problem from a discoverability perspective, and then an indexing problem as well.
Okay. Yeah, but otherwise, for sure, Googlebot and Sitebulb, they're efficient at crawling JavaScript. I don't think there's really huge issues there. The issues arise when it takes too long. And then for your side, it's do you have enough crawl budget to get indexed on time and within the crawl budget that's allocated to you? And so that's more the issue, is that making sure that your pages get rendered.
It's about being lightweight, right?
On time. Exactly.
Yeah.
And to help the process. Yeah.
Yeah, if anyone's interested in this stuff, Wanley, who've everything that they publish about all this stuff, they've really led the way. They have a tool called Too Long Didn't Render, which you can use. If you're concerned, you can go and put a web page in there, and it will tell you the computational cost of rendering a web page, and just give you kind of a barometer of will this take a long time? Is there a chance that this stuff's not going to get indexed?
Yeah,
or is it just really lightweight?
I thought that's what Sitebulb does as well.
Not in exactly the same way. They've collected data. They've done a whole load of research on loads of different sites, and so that's worth checking out for that sort of thing.
Okay.
There's a good point here about speed or time it takes. It might be able to render the page and it might look fine, but if you have 10,000 lines of JavaScript, and Google is able to crawl it, but it's a matter of if they really want to, or at least they want to index it and rank it, because they know that maybe a user, it will crash at their end as well. So one thing is if they're able to do it, another thing is if they actually want to do it and in the end actually rank it for the searchers. And I do see a lot of the challenges there.
One of the problems with that. Sorry, can I just go? So one of the problems for a lot of people though is that that Too Long Didn't Render is coming in because they've just put third-party plugins on the page, and they didn't actually know what the hell was happening with that, and they don't know what's happening at the other end of that. But the other thing that with JavaScript bloat surely is, and tell me if I'm fixing this the wrong way here, is that sometimes you've got JavaScript over all of the site, and you're actually only using it on 4 or 5 pages. So you've just put the code on. So presumably you can use Google Tag Manager then to stop that code. If you put the code in via Tag Manager, you can then use triggers so that it only loads when it's when that page is loading. So would that be a clever idea, a clever tip to people, or a stupid one?
I would.
You wouldn't do it that way.
No, well, the thing is all of those. I think you're referring to all the third-party tags that are wreaking havoc on your page speed for sure. those don't necessarily get crawled by Google during the rendering process. So even if you do that, it's not really what's going to speed up the rendering on the Google side of things. And so that will help for sure.
The users.
And doing like server-side tagging and things like that. But that's more for the user and getting better, like, the Chrome user experience, like great there. But in terms of the rendering on the Google side, I think it's more like working on the JavaScript that really matters if it's required for your content. It's just trying to, if it's a 5 megabyte app bundle, then that's not going to work well. You should do like a hybrid between some pre-rendered, and then you can hydrate and add like the JavaScript bells and whistles on top of it or things like that. But it's more like getting to like the core JavaScript that is required for the content and the CSS, like working on the critical rendering paths and just shipping what you need for the content. I think that's what, in terms of like core budget and making sure that you get indexed faster, I think that's more what's going to help you than just firing up some specific tags based on is it really required on that page or not. That's going to end up in the Chrome user experience report anyway, and penalize you there.
And there's like a fundamental difference between sites that happen to use a bit of JavaScript, which almost every site does, and sites where the content is dependent upon JavaScript. So the content itself is changing, right? And that's the difference in what we're talking about here. So if like for instance, the Sitebulb site doesn't have much dependence on JavaScript at all, so we don't really need to worry about that particularly. But if you have some bits of content, you might have like a product carousel, for instance, just getting populated by JavaScript, that sort of thing.
To show different colors, for example.
To show different colors, exactly. And you might find, all we're getting is white, which is perfect if you're in sort of Scandinavia, where that's all they ever want anyway, so it doesn't matter. But then you try and launch in the UK, and you have all these idiots trying to get red blinds and green blinds and blue ones. They can't find it because it's Google aren't actually indexing this stuff because it takes too long to load in this JavaScript. Like that's where you could have problems with this.
Yeah, that's a good point, because we know that the searchers are there. It's like we might not create 10 different pages based on color, for example, and we do a lot of JavaScript. But the key is that the challenge is to actually get you in front of those different types of searches and figuring out how to do it without having 9,000 lines of JavaScript.
Yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, you're only going to rank for your brand.
Exactly. This in some cases is good, but or even white blinds, which is also a good idea. But it's not enough though.
Well, I mean, on that one, and if it's not going too far away from the crawling tree, you said, Patrick, one version is great. That's perfect. Canonicals, not as good as one version. And then we talked about speed, but then Google advocates if you can, then use AMP because it speeds everything up. So, are you a fan of AMP or not a fan of AMP? Because that gives you two versions, 2 URLs of all your content anyway. Who wants to jump in on AMP?
Well, I'll make it short. I haven't never touched it, and I'm not sure I will. I'm no developer.
Oh God. Yeah. Okay.
No. Just build a fast page. That AMP it says well.
And I've been like that as well. I've been anti-AMP, but I think that's the old people and not the young people. So it'd be interesting to see what we go over here.
Right.
I mean, I think it depends on niches, right? Like if you're in news and stuff, like AMP is a big deal. Because you'll have so much traffic from mobile in the first place, and getting that real estate at the top is really, really important. So we don't have to do it for our own sites, and we don't have clients anymore because AMP came in after we needed clients. So hopefully we can actually get some proper feedback from Romain on that. But I see it as something which is important depending on which niche you're working in, and otherwise you probably don't need to worry about it.
Romain?
Yeah, like news for sure. News, it's kind of like almost a requirement. I think like I'm not against AMP. It's just like maybe it should be like more open source than it's less of a Google's own product. But because it's kind of like hosting, the cache of the AMP versions and all.
Yeah.
But other than that, it can be, even if you're not in news, it can be a good band-aid, like a quick fix to a site that's really slow, out of control, and then there's just too much. It's going to be a huge project. We're going to have to rebuild the whole site, with different technology and a very different stack and different concerns from the get-go. And that doesn't happen overnight. And if you're 2 years away from that, then maybe doing some AMP pages may actually help you in Google. But you need to make sure you have like a dedicated team though that really works on the AMP site, because you can't just like slap a plugin on it and call it a day, because like the conversion rates may also go down the drain too. So it's like a micro mobile site. You kind of have to like.
I was surprised though recently. I just because I'm not an AMP person, and I'm not a very clever person when it comes to the actual proper website stuff. But I found it's really easy to put AMP on a WordPress site now, because WordPress has got this sort of inbuilt thing, and it's press a few buttons, and it did speed up the site for sure. I mean, I tested on Lighthouse. I wonder if Lighthouse and Sitebulb get mixed up a lot.
Sure.
Anyway. And it speeded up quite a bit. It did come up with a couple of extra errors, but I thought AMP was going to be a pain in the ass, but it turned out to be quite easy.
But what was it for? Like a blog content?
Yeah, it was just a WordPress blog, so it's pretty straightforward.
Exactly.
No.
Yeah. I would.
Did you like how it looked?
On an e-commerce site, though, I'm not sure that it's prime for that still. But hey, I haven't looked into it for a while, so I wouldn't really know.
I'm not convinced about the longevity of AMP as a concept anyway. I think
it's kind of a fix, isn't it? It's more of fixing a symptom.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course.
But the idea of it is good. I mean, like when we have like clients and they're like, how do we start building with the we tell them like AMP like try AMP like, and then don't worry, like things will add themselves on top of it, but like you should like aim to develop something that is AMP-like, I think, because it's so fast, and that is really amazing and great, and for e-commerce or blogs or users around the world on 3G or whatever, and it just works well.
I think that's a good point to actually get the conversation going about fast sites, and you could do some tests and see, well, we're actually converting better on faster sites, and then get the whole internal discussion going whether or not we should look into AMP for our business. So it could be like the icebreaker for having that discussion. So it doesn't become, well, I think it's fast. Well, I think it's slow. It's
Is it faster or slower than AMP? Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we're pretty much up to 45 minutes already, so it doesn't take very long, guys. But what I'd like to do before we go though is firstly say thanks again to Majestic. Also, if you haven't used Majestic's new thing there, Majestic Monitor, that's a pretty cool different product that they've got that really sort of leverages its data to try and figure out who's an influencer and who's not in different verticals. And it's a different product to the sort of the link building stuff that Majestic does, but give that a try, and I think you'll find it a nice, interesting, fresh, new kind of idea. Anyway, but before we go, that's my advert for Majestic out of the way. Guys, if people want to get in touch with you, where can they find you? And maybe not so much for Rasmus, he's in house, because unless they want to buy blinds, but what kind of people do you want to get in contact with you, and how do they get in contact with you? Romain.
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, on Twitter. I'm coming back to Twitter, so believe it or not. So yeah, you can find me there. Hit me up there if you need any help with crawling, rendering, indexing, obviously rankings as well, right? And I'm sure you do if you're listening right now. So yeah, feel free to hit me up. But hurry, because maybe like your traffic, I may disappear from Twitter again. Like so, be proactive about it.
Okay, I'll let Patrick go last, and he can have the last word, because I'm sure he'll sell himself. Rasmus, what do you?
Yeah, no worries.
Where can we find you? Where can we find you?
Well, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn. I think maybe in your Facebook feed once in a while.
So you just put Sørensen in with that funny O thing that we haven't got on our keyboard.
Yeah, I think you
so
can pretty much just search Rasmus and Sørensen in. Not many of us, so I should pop up.
Excellent. Okay, Patrick, I'm sure you'd like all of our audience to come and speak to you. Pretty much, yeah. So thank you, Dixon. So you can find me on Twitter as well. I only really hang out there. So at Hathaway P, you can find me there. Yeah. But over on Sitebulb, so everybody should have probably downloaded it at the start, but if you haven't, you can do that now. Anyone who does SEO basically needs a crawler and therefore needs Sitebulb. Can I also, while I'm here, plug a live stream Q&A, which we're doing a bit like this, a week today, 8 o'clock. We've got Lily Ray and Jono Alderson, and we'll be talking about the business case for structured data. So if you go to youtube.com/Sitebulb, you can go check it out there and sign up to the reminder thing week today. Excellent. And Lily works with Romain, of course. So
awesome.
And Jono works with Yoast. So okay, guys. Absolutely, thank you ever so much. I'm sorry to anyone on Facebook for me not being able to see the questions on the Facebook feed. That's just because Zoom and Facebook just don't seem to just work as well as they should, really. But we'll see you again next month. Keep an eye on the Majestic blog for the next topic. And I'm going to press the buttons now to stop the recording and everything. And I think when I press it, everything dies and we cut you all off. So I'll email you to say thank you afterwards. But I really appreciate you guys coming in. So thanks ever so much, guys. Thank you, Dixon.
Thanks, everyone.
Guys.